regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners to order for Tuesday, May 8, 2018. And we're going to start out with adjustments to the agenda, and I will note that we are going to remove item 6C1 from the consent calendar. The applicant for that appeal has withdrawn their appeal, so that will not be on the consent calendar. I want to remind the commissioners we have a 10 o'clock time certain today, so we'll need to be watching the clock. And we also need to work an executive session in before lunch, because we do have a budget committee meeting starting at 1 o'clock today. So it's going to be fast and furious this morning. So any other adjustments to the agenda from the board? Any adjustments to the agenda from staff?
No.
And we'll move on to public comment and getting our list here. And we have 3 people signed up for public comment this morning, and everyone will get their 3 minutes. And if you wouldn't mind, when you step to the podium, state your name and where you're from, and then I'll start the timer for your 3 minutes. The first person is Quentin Cooper, followed by Carson Liddon. So Quentin.
My name is Quentin. I'm from Eugene. Today, I'm here to ask you guys to recognize a group of kids to be a part of or be the Lane County Youth Advisory Council. I know y'all have kids and grandkids, and there's been a mental health crisis. Kids feel like they don't have a voice anymore, like they've been pushed down. They got nothing left. They're quiet, they're silenced. This is to let their voices be heard, let them speak, let them be free, let them know that they still have power. Everyone here knows that suicide is an issue in the community. It's like every 6 days someone takes their life, and it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that at all, especially when it's a kid. That's just not right at all. The whole point of this is to fix that and give those kids a voice. The others that couldn't be here today, I know they'd say the same thing. They want that voice for the kids to be out there. It's hard. There's a national movement called Nothing for Us Without Us. And it's basically nothing about us without us. It basically is, if you're going to make a decision about us, let us speak on it. Let us say something. Let us have a word in it. If a group of people is going to be represented, then they should have someone that can represent them. The youth don't feel like they're represented at all anymore. My personal narrative. I've seen terrible things in the schools. I've seen people walk around the schools with cuts over their arms. I've seen kids be sad. I've seen stuff that I pray that you guys will never have to see if you haven't already seen it. I want that to change. This is a start to changing that. It's start to fixing the issues in the community that need to be addressed. We've been working on it with other schools, other kids, other agencies. We're coming together to create something great. I think with your help, and if you were to formally recognize us, we could really get that ball rolling. That's all I have.
Thank you, Quentin. Carson Liddon, followed by Vin Lanana.
Hi, my name is Carson Liddon. I'm from Eugene. My name is Carson Liddon. I'm a 15-year-old currently attending Churchill High School. I am here to ask you to grant permission to be formally recognized as the Lane County Youth Advisory Council. I am here speaking for all youth in the Lane County. We feel like we have no voice, and today we want a voice concerning mental health issues because it is affecting this youth community extremely. It is my mission to prevent suicide and create a healthy environment for our youth. On February 14, 2017, my friend Will Manson Greening died by suicide. Ever since my loss, I have been dedicated to sharing my voice out to the community and advocating mental health and suicide prevention. I believe that us youth voices have been quieted by upper officials on mental health and suicide prevention. With the Youth Advisory Council, us youth will have a voice in this community and have a say in what goes on in Lane County. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carson. Ben?
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. And my name is Vin Lanana, and I live in Eugene. I'm actually approaching you today to seek your support for you to endorse and help us move forward the Haywood Field project. And although sensitive to all the concerns regarding the East Grandstands, myself included, I will say that we also recognize the limitations of the East Grandstands. For the last 13 years, this city, the commissioners, Lane County, Springfield has supported all of the great things that have happened here. And when we created Tracktown USA, it was about being Tracktown USA, not just physically, spiritually as well. And we feel as though we've gotten to that point. 2021 is an opportunity that will never be had again. And that opportunity to host the world, 214 countries, in this county, in this community, is something that we really should embrace with both arms. What we're seeking for your support here today is for you to reach out to City Council in Eugene for your full endorsement for moving forward with the project. Lots of time, extensive planning has gone in. All of the issues that have been raised have been addressed, and we feel that the Haywood Field project will solidify us as Tracktown USA for a very long time. So in the end of the day, we ask you to reach out to your colleagues on the City Council and help us to move this project forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that's everyone I had signed up for public comment this morning. Was there anyone else that wanted to address the board? Seeing none, then we'll move on to Commissioner's response to public comments or other remonstrance. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony this morning. As mayor in Cottage Grove, I had the privilege of instituting a youth advisory committee, and they have done incredible work. They've been before the governor, they've been before the legislature and testified on some whippets, which are, I'm sure most people are familiar with those, but they're, I'm not familiar with them other than the terminology, but they're devastating to young people and people that abuse that. And I very, very much support the Youth Advisory Council concept. I've seen it work, and I've seen it work in really, really great ways. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. And with that, thank you, sir.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Concerning the problems of suicide and youth suicide, I just want to thank you guys for coming today and talking about this openly. Also appreciate your advocacy for a youth council. I agree with Commissioner Williams that youth council will be a good thing here at Lane County government, and I appreciate you coming and talking about something that a lot of people aren't talking about, and yet it's a very real problem in our schools and among youth that are in or out of school. And so I just want to thank you for taking the time to come here. And as for Coach Lanana, I was there at the finish line the other day at the Oregon Twilight, and a friend of mine came from San Francisco and was in the 400 meters. You may recall he was the 88-year-old gentleman who set a new Haywood Field Stevenson track record for over 80 in the 400-meter race. Pretty significant. And that race, which had several Olympians, silver medalists, and bronze medalists in that track meet, a really phenomenal track meet. And for those of you who may not be track fans, for $15 to witness a track meet of that type is undoubtedly one of the bargains that we have here in Lane County, and I would just encourage you to get any seat other than A8 next year, because that's the best seat, I think. And as far as the work over there and our support, I think that we have a strong support, not only by this board, but also by the City Council for endorsing and helping and putting in the effort to make sure that this phenomenal track meet comes off, and which will lead to even more work in the future, whether it's the NC2AA's track and field championships, or whether it's the Olympic trials or the world track and field. So obviously this is something that's not only important because it's Tracktown USA, but it's really a part of the economic vitality of what the city government and county government should be working toward. So thank you for coming today, and this has my support too.
Thank you. Any other response? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Quentin and Carson, thank you for being here today. And Quentin, I met you several weeks ago at an event at Willamette High School. It's a pleasure to meet you then, and I look forward to hearing more from you, because you have important things to say. You did that night, you did today, and I know that you will for the future. Look forward to working with you. To Coach Lanana, thank you for being here this morning. I'm reflecting about my days at Hayward Field, and while you're here, I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but while you're here, I remember I attended University of Oregon starting in 1973, and back then you could just run around the track anytime you wanted, and I did, a lot. But my most memorable time there, even though I've been to Olympic trials there and NC2A championships there, on May 30th, 1975, I happened to walk in the north side. The gates were open, and the last race of the day was a featured event with Steve Prefontaine and Frank Shorter. It was a great race, and Steve kind of kicked pretty hard at the end and won that race. And I remember seeing him hit the finish line. I was not very far away when that happened, and the next morning we heard the news that Pre had run his last race. And to me, Hayward Field then in 1975 was a wonderful place. Through the years since then, it's changed a lot. It's not the same place that I walked into that day, but it still feels the same, even though much of the old spectator areas changed pretty significantly. It still feels the same. And whatever happens with the spectator area, making it better for people to see, whatever we do for the future is always changing, always has changed, but it will always feel exactly the same. It will feel like May 30th, 1975 to me every time I look at that place. Thanks for being here today.
Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I also want to say, Quentin and Carson, thank you very much for coming here this morning and speaking, and really appreciate it. And thank you, Commissioner Williams, for your remarks as well with your leadership in Cottage Grove. I would agree, and you know, when Commissioner Farr and I attended the Teen Suicide Summit, one of the first questions out of the gate was, a lot of old people around this table, but where's the youth? And frankly, I heard that pretty loud and clear. I think that was Representative Fahey's legislative aide who brought that up. And I think it was a good point. And it's something that I think all of us took to heart. And so for you coming here this morning and testifying, first of all, it takes courage anytime you're going to come before an elected body, and we're just regular folks. So, I mean, but to do that, but I really appreciate that. And on the issue of teen suicide, it hit me a little too close for home, not my home personally, but my neighbor. Tuesday, in fact, a week ago, today, Thurston High School student, and he took his life. And we don't know all the issues involved. My wife and I visited next door and visited with them briefly. They have a lot of family support, thank God. And but that is one where we saw him as a little boy, and he loved baseball. That's the thing you always think about. He loved baseball, and saw him as a little boy. And then here at 17 years old, he decided that like I said, don't know all the circumstances involved, but took his own life. And I would agree. I think having a youth council where you're directly relating to folks, because while his friends now looking back maybe saw some things, but at the time when you're in high school, you don't always see that. And so I think it was great. So I want to say thank you very much for coming forward this morning. And with that, I also want to recognize, because what I don't want to do is focus on the things that are negative that are happening to our youth. But even though we need to really embrace this, I think, with our youth, and that's why I'm gonna say yes. I think this is a great idea, and I would hope that we would, as a board, would embrace this idea. At the same time, I just wanted to point out a young man from Hamlin Middle School, an 8th grader, named Jacob Rickey. And he's got a little video on Facebook. It's under Springfield Public Schools, but he's describing the app that he developed as an 8th grader and for use by Hamlin staff and part of the STEM education project. But he's an 8th grader, and he developed an app for the school, for the teachers. And so I'm thinking, holy smokes. That is pretty impressive, and so there's a lot of, and by the way, while I'm sad to see Sue Reekie Smith leave as the superintendent, I also want to thank her because she really focused hard and big time on the CTE programs in Springfield, in the Springfield School District, which is really developing this type of thought and encouragement for kids to get involved and to really their creative minds put it together without a college degree. But here he is, an 8th grader, developing an app. Who knows, we'll see him in the future. He may be the next Steve Jobs or something like that. Who knows? And so it's pretty exciting on that. And Coach Lanana, thanks for being here this morning. We'll discuss a little bit more about the Hayward Field project. And so many of us here are track fans, and I've been a track fan for a long, long time, as you and I have discussed over the years. And still stay in contact with my old friend John McCardle, who, of course, Commissioner Williams is former mayor of Cottage Grove. John's a 1980 Olympian from the hammer throw and mayor of Independence, Oregon. So, great guy and a big man. And so, but thank you again for being here this morning. Appreciate it. Thank you.
A big, very coordinated man.
Yes.
I want to say thanks for Vin for coming. We will be bringing up that topic later today. I've been a track fan long enough. I ran a 10 flat 100 in high school. I have to mention to people it was yards.
That's still a fast 100.
Yeah. But yeah, and believe it or not, in our high school, I was the number 5 man in the 100. If that gives you any idea, we were state champs all 3 years I was in high school. So, I'd like to talk to Quentin and Carson a little bit. I got the opportunity to see the youth council in Cottage Grove at work when I went down there when the governor came to Cottage Grove to talk about tobacco policy, because that youth council there, after addressing whippets, had moved on to tobacco use in youth. And she came down there to honor them specifically, the governor did, which is, a pretty amazing thing to have a bunch of high school kids bring the governor to your town. So it's a powerful thing, and I really think you guys have a good idea and you're on to something. I do know we have a position in our Poverty and Homelessness Board for a youth advocate. As far as homelessness goes, it's, I think, currently vacant. I'm not quite sure whether it's been filled or not. And I would look to you guys to stick around a little bit, because we're going to be introducing somebody that's relatively new to Lane County staff, that's head of our Trillium Behavioral Health. And maybe Karen might mention what other advisory committees we have, like our Public Health Advisory Committee and our Mental Health Advisory Committee, that maybe there's a possibility of plugging your council into to provide that input into our system directly, because youth suicide is a serious issue, and particularly this year has been almost epidemic here in Lane County, and we need to find solutions. We need to hear from the folks that are affected. And I really appreciate your courage in coming forward and talking about a tough issue, particularly when it's probably affected you both personally. So I really appreciate that input. So stick around for a few minutes at least till we get past introducing our new employee. So with that, if there's no further remonstrance, is there any emergency business this morning?
No, we have none today.
And none from the board. So that gets to employee introduction, and I will turn this over to Mr. Mokrzycki and call Karen and Lisa.
Chair, Karen Gaffney, our Director of Health and Human Services, is joining me along with Lisa Roth, our new Division Manager for Trillium Behavioral Health. And I've had an opportunity to be in a few meetings with Lisa recently, and we'll just tell you that Karen will talk a little bit more about her selection and her background and experience, but I've been really impressed with her contributions and energy and passion and team focus, and really pleased with the outstanding team of division managers that Karen has developed. And we've talked over the past few weeks. I said, Karen, gosh, you have a number of new folks here. Now, Karen's only been here in this role,
right.
You've been here for 25 years.
Yeah.
But in this role as the director since the end of July, so 7-8 months here or so. And she has a number of new folks. And so we talked about, we really need to get some of these folks in front of the board so that before too long you have an opportunity to meet these great individuals and put a face with the name, hear a little bit about their background as they will be coming forward and talking about issues in front of the board likely in the future. So I'm really excited about the whole team that Karen has put together, and particularly Lisa's great background and experience. And so Karen, if you just want to share some of that with the board.
Absolutely. Good morning, Chair Bozovich and Commissioners. It is truly a pleasure today to be able to introduce you to Lisa. I know some of you have had an opportunity to meet her. She started with us at the end of October as the manager for our Trillium Behavioral Health Division, which is a unique position for us in that Lisa and her team are embedded over at Trillium, and their office is over on Millrace, and represent the county. Largely our partnership with Trillium is embodied there with Lisa. And in terms of our selection process, and I'll tell you a little bit about her background in a moment, but it's interesting. We've talked, I know Steve has talked with you a lot about the behaviors that we're focused on at the county and with our employees and leaders. And in this selection process, in the process of checking references and our interview questions, we really focused on a lot of those elements to pick the right person. And I will tell you that in terms of a passion for the work that we do, and particularly for serving people with behavioral health needs, it is hard to top Lisa in her commitment to that work, and particularly being our voice over at Trillium, focused on people who are living in poverty and also have mental health and substance abuse issues. She's terrific in that way. And Steve referenced how she is in meetings, and I think that piece of being able to connect with people, both our teams, but the community and the feedback from Trillium has been tremendous too in her work in really building the county and Trillium relationship. So before I turn it over to her, I want to tell you a little bit about her background. She came to us with a little more than 17 years of experience in behavioral health and holds a PhD in clinical psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute and a master's in counseling psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. And if you ever want to talk Jungian, Lisa's the person to talk to about that. Before coming to our department, she served as the clinical services manager for Mid-Columbia Center for Living, which is a community behavioral health agency serving Hood River, Wasco, and Sherman counties. So she's worked in a number of settings, from hospitals to shelters, and really brings that experience with her to our work here at Trillium Behavioral Health. We've talked a lot over the years with the board about our focus on trauma-informed care. And that's another piece that Lisa really brings to us from her prior work in looking at how we best work with each other in terms of our trauma, and most importantly, how we can deliver our services in a trauma-informed way to the public. So that's another huge piece that she brings. So it is my pleasure to introduce Lisa. And did you want to say anything before we turn it back to the board?
Part of me was like, no. I just wanted to say I am so happy that I'm here, and I'm so impressed with the passion and the intelligence and the drive of the communities and the members and the providers. And I mean, this is just really an amazing place. So I feel very privileged to be in my position and to be able to advocate for folks, as I've done for most of my life. And I'm just really grateful. So I'm also very connected with what our youth have come today in terms of talking about. So I'm also very impassioned about youth voice and choice. That comes from the System of Care Wraparound Initiative that's been going on for quite some time, that I am now lucky enough to be a part of in this county. So happy to join in that conversation.
Excellent. Any questions from the board or comments? Commissioner Farr.
Just a quick comment. I had a chance to meet you, Lisa, and you're not really talking about your main accomplishments, which is on the stage, right?
That's right.
A musical actress. Yeah.
Not well. If you don't mind the tone, musical actress, but maybe just actress would be the.
All right. Well,
yeah.
Welcome. It's
Thank you.
a pleasure to see you working. You have a great department over there, and we will certainly all miss Bruce, but Bruce will always be with us. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other comments from the board? So I'm going to take a little advantage of Karen here and surprise her a little bit. Can you just speak real quick to the incident command that was set up earlier this year around youth suicide, and also maybe just where youth may be able to fit into some of our advisory boards while our youth are here?
Absolutely, Chair Bozovich. And I'll talk to the specific suicide piece, and then I think also it's good to broaden it beyond that, because my experience with youth is there's an investment and experience in a whole host of issues where Youth Voice would like to be a part of what the county does. So certainly, I know some of the speakers alluded to the cluster of youth suicide that we had earlier this year. We did mobilize in our department. We have both public health in our department, and we have behavioral health and mental health. So those divisions in particular are highly involved in a response anytime we have a youth suicide. So because of the number of suicides we had in such a relatively short period of time, we needed to mobilize our larger department resources in support of that response and really reaching out to the schools, coordinating with the state in terms of the resources that the health authority is able to provide us, and working with those families and our own partners within the county. So we did mobilize in that way until we were able to bring that back into our public health division, which is where our ongoing suicide prevention efforts live. You may or may not remember the state public health division gives us enough funding for one FTE of a suicide prevention coordinator. So that's not a lot of staff support for a county our size. And that's not focused only on youth suicide, but really on all suicides in the community. And we do have a plan between now and July. We'll bring Roger, who is our suicide prevention coordinator, to the board with some data he's been preparing to really have a larger Board of Health discussion around suicide in Lane County. I think that's an important conversation for us to have. In terms of youth engagement and involvement, you mentioned the position that's specifically set aside for a youth advocate on our Poverty and Homelessness Board. Lisa was reminding me when we were listening to public testimony about our System of Care group, and while that's not officially appointed to advise the board, it is a functional group of agencies and organizations who serve some of our most high-risk youth. So that includes developmental disabilities, mental health agencies, juvenile justice, Department of Human Services from the state and others. Trillium Behavioral Health convenes that group. And since the beginning of A System of Care, we've had both family representatives through Oregon Family Support Network and youth representatives as part of that group from Youth Era. So making sure we integrate youth voice into those conversations that are impacting youth, I think, is an important value. Our other advisory committees, and you named a whole host of them earlier, don't have official youth seats on those committees. It's interesting. Some of you were here in the Commission on Children and Families days. And that effort certainly was focused on bringing together not only people who were concerned about issues for children and families, but really finding a way to lift up youth voice in those discussions and decisions as well. That specific commission doesn't exist anymore, but certainly a lot of the materials and learnings from that time we still have, if it's the board's interest in either looking at how do we effectively include youth on our existing advisory committees, and I would suggest it's typically more than one youth person to have an effective youth voice on those committees that are focused on specific topics, or if you're interested in pursuing the youth council idea. Commissioner Williams talked about Cottage Grove, and they've had a wonderful youth council for years that we've had an opportunity to work with as well. So that certainly will take some resources to make sure that it's effective and provide that same level of staff support to have an effective youth voice there. But that's certainly something that we have been able to do in the past.
Well, thank you for that update on those issues. I think you'll probably find that the board is supportive of the idea of finding a way to wrap youth voice into some of these advisory committees, and whether we set up and form a Lane County Youth Council, I guess we'll probably have further conversations, whether it's a separate advisory committee from getting youth more involved with existing advisory committees. I'll look to the administrator maybe to further those conversations, but I really want to appreciate the youth that did come in, and I appreciate the fact that you were able to answer those questions on the fly without a lot of preparation.
No, absolutely.
So.
And I think there's, I was just thinking about advisory committees in public works too, around parks and roads. And I think there are lots of opportunities in the work that the county does to involve youth.
We're involved in a lot of things that do have impact on youth. And I think that's, to get their voice, is an important voice to have. Commissioner Farr.
And as you know, the Poverty and Homelessness Board has the Youth Homeless Solutions Work Group, which is well staffed and well participated in. You look at that work group and it's largely not youth. So as it points out, there are youth on there most certainly, as you look down the list, but and I've not seen all of the work of that subcommittee yet, but we do have elements in place that we can build upon. I'm certain of that.
Well, and Chair Bozovich, Commissioner Farr, there's been a significant, as I'm sure you're aware, body of work between the 15th Night effort and their youth council and the work that's happening through the Poverty and Homelessness Board. And so I think there's increasing interest and work in solidifying that youth council voice into the work of the PHB.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I just want to thank you for supplying that response, and I also just want to say welcome to Lisa.
Yeah.
It's great to have our behavioral health system staffed, and the work that does, particularly in integrating behavioral health into all of our physical health systems, has been really a great effort by Lane County over the last several years. So thank you for being here, and welcome to Lane County.
Thank you.
So moving on to the consent calendar, these are items that are considered routine by the Board of Commissioners and will be enacted in a single motion, and there will be no separate discussion of items. If there was discussion desired, the item would have been removed from the consent calendar during adjustments to agenda. If you want to look at the details of all these items, you can go online and click View Material under each of the items on the consent calendar. And I will note that item C1 has been removed from the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval of the consent calendar with the removal of item 6C1.
Second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Lyken, seconded by Commissioner Williams. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So that moves us on to item 7A, order number 1805-0806, in the matter of awarding a contract for a community corrections center residential reentry coordinator at Lane County Adult Corrections Facility and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the contract. And I believe we have Lieutenant Riley here. So I'll turn it over to you.
Morning, Commissioners. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about that contract. A little over a year ago, we put this in place. In my opinion, this was the vital key missing piece to our community correction center. Majority of the inmates that we have at our 39-bed facility come back to us from prison. They finish the last piece of their prison sentence in our residential reentry center, and then a lot of them transition to sponsors or transition home. And I refer to it as a soft landing as opposed to a crash landing. Well, a lot of our folks have been in prison for not years, some decades. They come to us and we help them transition back into the community. When you just open the door and release someone from prison right back to the street, the chance of success is slim. And folks that come through us, this residential reentry center contract that we put in place allows that person to work with these folks, put a plan together, help them transition. A lot of the folks coming out of prison don't have birth certificates, ID. They have court issues that are still unresolved from decades before, child support, family issues, just having them maneuver. A lot of folks, we didn't have cell phones when they went to prison. Now we have smartphones, we have technology, we have all kinds of stuff. These folks are, the deck is stacked against them when they come out, and we're helping them transition back. We have deputy sheriffs that work inside of the work release center. The contract position helps maneuver and do all the things that those guys don't have the ability to do.
Great. Any questions for Lieutenant Riley on the contract? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion then on the order. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval of Order 1805-0806 in the matter of awarding a contract for a Community Corrections Center residential reentry coordinator at the Lane County Adult Corrections Facility and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the contract.
Second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Lyken and seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve Order 1805-0806. Any discussion to the motion?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
Slightly adjacent to the motion, but really thanks for the tour of parole and probation last week. That was a remarkably eye-opening tour. Thank you. I have a lot more to say about that, but I won't say it now.
No, I thank you for taking time out of your day to go on that. Parole and probation is a significant partner to the sheriff's office, and we share the same clients. They come through our jails, they go to prison, they come back through our facilities into parole and probation. They use our programs to sanction back and forth, and the partnership to get these folks back to the community. We couldn't do it without the partnership, so thank you for taking time the other day to come through that.
And you have 60 or so officers who keep thousands of men and women in their jobs and with their families. It's remarkable. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioners.
So I just want to take a moment just to say I'm really pleased to see this contract going through. As sitting for the board as a representative to the Public Safety Coordinating Council, and also in my work at Association of Oregon Counties with the Public Safety Committee there, and working through the Justice Reinvestment grant process and the budgets. We've been doing some pretty amazing work at Lane County, and this is just one of those tools that we're working on reentry, and we've actually been ahead of the curve in accepting a lot of early release particularly for women, which we were able to do because of our early certification under the Prison Rape Elimination Act, to get those women down into the local community earlier out of their prison sentences so that the state didn't bump up against their limits as far as needing to build a new women's prison, which we've been right at the edge of for several years now, bouncing along the max capacity of the women's prison system. And this is just one more piece of that reentry program. Our partnerships with sponsors at the Oaks at 14th and the co-location of a parole officer there. We do all sorts of pieces of our justice reinvestment and basically all this restorative justice work we're doing. This is one little piece, but it's such a critical piece. And getting those folks that soft landing back into the community, as you referred to it, is so important so that we're not setting these folks up for failure. And we're actually setting them up for success. And I really appreciate this contract.
And if I could add one more piece, the program you're talking about, I've lost track of the numbers, but the last time we checked in with that, I think we had 130 folks come through what we call RLAN, which was the funding you're talking about. I think we've had 2 failures that have come through that program. Those folks come back, they spend 60 days in our community correction center, then they transition to sponsors for another 90 days. And then they go on to probation. And so that early integration of parole and probation from the time they're in prison through us to sponsors back to the community is truly working. And it's money well put towards a great program, and we're seeing the success of it. So.
Yeah, and it's showing up in the data for our recidivism numbers across Lane County. We're doing very well when we look at ourselves against state averages. Any further discussion of the motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Lieutenant.
All right, thank you.
So that gets us down to county administration and announcements. Mr. Mokahysky.
Mr. Chair, would you like to take up the Hayward item?
While we have
Matt's here.
I guess we lost. Oh, Mr. Roberts is here.
Yeah, while Matt's here, I don't know. I saw Vin walking around on the phone.
Coach, I just saw walking this way. So.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, we could take that up quickly if
You want to take that up, and then
for our
my
10 o'clock
items don't require.
Okay. So we'll jump down to item 8C, which was a discussion of the University of Oregon's plans for Hayward Field and existing facilities, and I will turn this back to Steve and Greg Rickoff.
So, Mr. Chair, this was the request from the commissioners last week that we have a discussion about the University of Oregon's plans for renovation of Hayward Field. We've, throughout this discussion, as it just became public in the last couple weeks, we've had a number of folks inquire, including commissioners, who've had inquiries from various communities about the potential of relocating, reusing all or parts of the existing grandstands if they are to be moved. And so we looked into that. We reached out to the University of Oregon to understand more what the process that they're going through. And I'm going to let Mr. Rickoff, because he has extensive experience working at the university and I think can speak that language better than I can. But, we really have tried to, in the spirit of partnership, work with the university, understand those plans, understand what the needs of the community and the desires of the community may be, and any opportunity for us to find a solution. We've talked about our 3 behaviors, right? Passion to serve, driven to connect, and focused on solutions. And so we try to tap into those when we're working with our community partners. We understand that the grandstands are aging and unsafe in many regards, that the seats are narrow, that many of them are coated in lead-based paint, and they're not all fully ADA accessible. So there are some fundamental challenges with that infrastructure, which present challenges in reusing some of those materials, as well as the cost related to relocating them to another site. And we can go into that in greater detail if you would like, but I'll turn over to Mr. Rickoff maybe to add some other comments.
Yes, Chair Bozovich, Commissioners. I guess at this point, what is your pleasure? I certainly have some background information that I can provide in terms of the the thoughtfulness that has gone into the University of Oregon's decision and the concerns regarding any delay and what it might cause to the overall project and the commitment to coming events. How much background would be helpful for you?
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Rickoff, Mr. Mogorhaiski, and Mr. Roberts for being here present this morning. You know, I brought this up last week because of the urgent nature, the timeliness of what is happening right now. The Eugene City Council, of course, is considering an option of slowing down the construction through a process that they're looking at, and I think that. I have some personal feelings about it, and at this point in time, I mentioned during items that Hayward Field has changed a lot since 1973 when I attended university there. The track's been resurfaced, the stands have been rebuilt, we have temporary bleachers that come in and go out. I used to watch the track meets from the dorms across the street. It was girls' dorms over there, but we could all kind of crowd in the windows and get a free view of the track meet. You can't do that anymore because the Hayward Field has changed. However, Hayward Field is still the same as far as the place, you know, the site, all of the history that happened in that place. And I guess my question at this point then is there action that we can consider to pass information along to the City of Eugene that we as a board support, don't support? We've not had the discussion yet. The renovations that are planned for Hayward Field, and that we look at it in a timely fashion in order to make certain that we don't lose momentum toward the 2021 games.
Chair Bozovich, Commissioner Farr, I think, yes, there is certainly a place where the Commission's voice would be appreciated in sharing their position with the Eugene City Council. As you know, this is moving quickly. Those that have been working on this design have sought to keep the East Grandstands and keep as much as possible. It was certainly the first, second, and third plan as they moved through, and they just found it untenable. There is a lot of community discussion right now, and I would say that there's momentum moving towards helping the university proceed with, we should note, completely privately funded project to have the track and field renovated, but time is critical for their ability to move forward with the project. They are going to be incorporating as many elements of Hayward Field and the East Grandstands in the new design. There will be museum components in recognition of the storied history of Hayward Field throughout the project, but they do need to move with alacrity. So I would say at this point a message encouraging the Eugene City Council to understand the difficult place it puts on, the pressures it puts on the university and on the university donors who are supporting this effort with any kind of historic designation that now truly is the time for action.
Thank you. And then just a little bit more on that. You know, we all many of us attended the Trevor Lane County event last week. Great event, which Hayward Field was featured, because Hayward Field is an integral part of attracting people to our community. The things that happen at Hayward Field, the things that have happened, historic Hayward Field. You know, it really is a major jewel in our crown as far as bringing people to Lane County, and to make certain that they have a world-class experience. We don't. You know, when you have opportunities for world-class experience, you should seize them. And many of the things that we live among, you know, our rivers and our streams, our air, the things that we live around are world-class experiences. The University of Oregon provides Hayward Field. It's a gift to all of us. And I'll mention, I wrote a letter to the Eugene City Council and distributed it to the councilors last week when they had the initial discussion. And just a couple of the words that I wanted to mention to them is that historically significant parts of the East Grandstand, as well as other parts of Hayward Field, will be preserved and incorporated into a new 6,000 square foot museum that really will give a greater opportunity to commemorate the history, the years of history, some of which has been buried, changed, whatever it may be, of Hayward Field. And I would imagine there's got a little bit of football that's going to be shown there too, because before Austin Stadium, the Ducks played football there. Absolutely. So it's, I look forward to the discussion from the balance of the board, but I'm in favor of sending a message to the Eugene City Council, encouraging them to move forward as quickly as possible and allow the renovations that have been planned by the University of Oregon to move forward in a timely fashion, once again allowing no stumbling toward 2021.
Commissioner Leighton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Farr, for bringing this to the board as well, and much appreciated. And I think, looking at this, and so as a member of the advisory committee to the World Track and Field Games, I think what it is, as much as anything, might have been just their execution from the University of Oregon, and the fact there really wasn't a heads up given, but the video just went out, and all of a sudden, I think people were kind of caught off guard a little bit. Now, being part of, and I haven't been really part of the internal discussions, I did know that it was likely that Hayward Field was going to look a lot different than what it looks like today. But I think as much as anything, I think, frankly, my perspective, this is one of those golden opportunities. And I think, as Coach Lanana had mentioned earlier, if you think about this, the first time ever on American soil, the World Track and Field Games will be outdoor, because the indoors have already been here. They were in Portland, but the outdoor, first time ever, they will be here on American soil. And that's the part of it I think we need to be really embracing, and how the opportunities that will present itself is not just the World Track and Field Games, but what goes beyond. And as I've noted, the house that Ruth built, Yankee Stadium, no longer exists. It was torn down. The new Yankee Stadium's there, and guess what? It still showcases the New York Yankees have still won 27 World Series championships. That did not go away. Comiskey Park is gone. Anybody miss the Kingdome? I'm just curious. I don't. And, but yet, what's happened in Seattle since the Kingdome? My word, it's been transformed. And to really an incredible, not just sporting opportunities, but an economic opportunity has been really significant. So this is one where I think once you get back kind of the shock and see, oh wow, this is what it's going to look like without really getting a heads up, I think now is the time to kind of settle back down and realize this is a golden opportunity, not just for here in Lane County, but remember, this is an Oregon event and a United States event, because we've heard from Tracktown that there's going to be events all over this state commemorating the World Track and Field Games. So they're including different parts of the state, whether you're in Central Oregon, North, South, the coast. I mean, that's the exciting thing about this whole opportunity here. So that's kind of how I look at it. And so I think this is a great opportunity, and I really support where things are going now. The East Grandstands, they serve the purpose, and as we've been told, and I think Greg, you mentioned this morning, there's an article out that the fact that, I mean, I know it's kind of stretched a little bit, but it's not really that. It's coats of paint that are kind of holding it together, and because it is older, and it doesn't meet some of the guidelines that's needed. But this new stadium will go beyond the Worlds and way into the future, that I think will be a really great catalyst, not just for the University of Oregon, not just Eugene, and not just Lane County, but for the state of Oregon as well. And because Tracktown is not going to go away. Tracktown is here and will be here to stay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I really appreciate hearing from both our representative on Travel Lane and also a representative to the World's Advisory Committee. This is really an economic development issue, and I've had to deal with historic designations. I did a project to replace a shop building out at the Leeburg Dam Powerhouse site, which is a National Historic Registry site because of the WPA buildings there with the artwork that stretches back to the Roosevelt administration, and it added probably a year to that project to get the approvals from the federal and state historic preservation folks, and probably added a significant cost to the project in those delays. This is an issue where we're looking at a massive economic issue, and we're getting ready here in a few minutes to talk economic development for this community. And delay in this project could be fatal to the project and fatal to the world's. And I really think that this board maybe needs to speak with one voice to the city council. And I'm looking to the board. Do we do that as a motion to support a letter of testimony before tomorrow's work session? I think where the city is going to take this issue up and kind of give a yay or nay, or what do you propose? And I think Commissioner Farr, you were kind of taking some of the lead on this.
And if other commissioners have words to say prior to a motion that I may be ready to make.
Any other comments before? Commissioner Sorensen.
I just want to say that I think it's important that we allow the university to move ahead with its project. And I think that there are always opportunities for people to make requests for historic preservation designation. And there is an existing law that allows people to make those requests. But I think that in this instance, and this in no way takes away those rights of the public or historic preservation activists to make requests, but this does go to our responsibilities in the economic development arena, and especially because this particular facility is so important to the future of our interests in the nodal development of a particular type of economic activity that's unique to our community, namely the track and field component of our economic development efforts, which is a huge part of our overall economic development. So I could go into my own athletic achievements at Hayward Field, but you know, and it is true I did defeat Steve Prefontaine at one time, but I won't go into that right here because it's not really relevant. So I'll just say I appreciate the work that we're doing to try to cooperate with the university on this. I would register a bit of caution if we're going to be involved in Eugene City Council activities. We might want to include a paragraph or something that says, and if you ever have any ideas for us on what we're doing, please, we would like to hear from you as well.
Right on.
So, Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. And then I'm going to make a motion in a second here, Mr. Rickoff, Mr. Mokrzycki, and Mr. Chair, that will ask us to draft a letter to pass along to the Eugene City Council within the next day, within the next 24 hours, which does not bring the letter back to the board, but I'd like to put that in the hands of the board chair or the board leadership in order to approve the wording of the letter. I wrote a letter last week. I can give you a couple of the paragraphs from that letter. It was more of a personal letter because it was more surrounding my experiences, because it was from me, not from the board. But some of the elements of that letter could be incorporated into a letter that was written by you, Mr. Rickoff, or by someone on your staff. So my letter just stated, I would like to express my strong support for the structure and facility renovation to our historic Hayward Field. Since I attended college at the University of Oregon starting in 1973, I've joined tens of thousands of others enjoying many events at the facility. Through the years, the U of O has always kept an eye on the integrity of the track and spectator areas in a way that has necessitated numerous remodels and facility improvements, all of which have resulted in world-class experiences for athletes, officials, and spectators alike. Then I go on to talk about the renovation and elements of the renovation. So I can send you a copy of that, Mr. Rickoff, to form, maybe the basis of a draft that you would forward to the board chair for signature. And if Mr. Mokrzycki and Rickoff, if that works in the process. Then, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to draft a letter to the Eugene City Council in support of renovation of historic Hayward Field.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Lightgen to draft a letter in support of renovation of Hayward Field. Any discussion to the motion?
I said historic Hayward Field.
Historic Hayward. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. So that gets us to 10 o'clock, and we have a time certain item for 10 o'clock on economic development. And I'm trying to get my pages back where I was. Yes. Work session on community and economic development, and we have Sarah Means, our community and economic development manager here, and I guess you'll introduce the rest of your panel to us.
Yeah, I will do that. Thank you.
Okay. No guarantees.
Don't make me look at it.
Okay, thank you, Board. Thanks for a few moments here just to get set up. And I will be introducing my guests here today.
Thank you. Who are you again? You. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, you're doing my way.
So thank you for your time this morning. We very much appreciate it. I'm generally here on very specific topics and not talking to you about the bigger picture of economic development. And this is my initial attempt to change that. I think it's really important to be in front of the board and talk more globally about the program that we have here in Lane County. It is an important program, a popular program, and we do a lot of great work with your support and certainly with our leadership, staff leadership support. So here we go, our first attempt at looking at a couple of very specific aspects of the program. We could be here all morning if we talked about the entire program. So I pulled out a few things that I thought were important to talk about today, and you see with me here are a couple of really great and important partners that we have in economic development. So here is Caroline Cummings, who is here to talk to us a little bit later about Oregon Rain and the partnership that we have with Oregon Rain. Caroline is the interim director at Oregon Rain right now, and I recognize how busy she is with the WAC coming up and with her new duties as interim director, so appreciate her time here today.
Thank you.
Angela Pecor is the board chair at Lane Workforce Partnership. I get the privilege and pleasure of serving on the Lane Workforce Board with Angela and work with her on a couple of different opportunities that you'll hear about later in this presentation around regional innovation training program and such. And then, of course, Christina Payne, the executive director at the Lane Workforce Partnership. Again, a very important partner through different leveraged programs that we have with LWP, and then also with sector strategy work, which really has dominated our work plan over the last year or so, longer than that, frankly, and moving forward, as we believe that's a really great way to organize the work that we do. So I'm going to kick it off with a few slides, a few introductory comments, and then these guys will jump in as we talk with those to those specific programs. But I also want to make sure that we keep this more conversational in nature, and so please do feel free to ask me questions as they come up, and be happy to answer them. So, as I said, this is sort of my initial approach at doing a year in review. For the board. We are coming up on the end of our fiscal year, so I think this is timely in nature. We had a lot of really great efforts that took place over the last year. I'm pulling out 3 of those, as I mentioned, because they stood out in my mind, and I think there's some really great opportunities to speak to these 3 initiatives that we took on this past year. That's not to say that we didn't do a lot more, because we did, but these are really great examples of some good work that's going on in community and economic development. First is our strategic work plan development. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but each of you participated in that effort, so thank you. You gave our consultant, Allison Larson, a lot of really great information, and it was helpful in the development of the work plan that you'll see roll out over the next couple of years. The second initiative is our sector strategy initiative. You all have heard of Technology Association of Oregon. You all have heard of our food and beverage sector strategist, Mike Elkonen. You are all likely aware that we are initiating the wood products, the Advanced Wood Products Sector Strategy Initiative. This is all coming through our partnership with not only Lane Workforce Partnership, but all of the economic development agencies across the region, and some really fantastic works going on there. We've not brought to you in any comprehensive way sort of the explanation behind why sector strategies, so a little bit later on in this presentation you're going to get to see a short video that explains it very clearly, why we might do this work in this way. So I think that that'll be important. And then finally, the leveraged programs and entrepreneurship. And so when I talk about leveraged programs, I'm talking about regional innovation training funds and the regional entrepreneurship fund that this board has supported over the last number of years. We pool our money with Lane Workforce Partnership and other partners, and it really allows us to reach more businesses and local program offerings in a more impactful way. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then also, of course, this board has been very supportive of Oregon Rain and their efforts in rural Lane County. And so we'll give a little bit of a report back on the work going on there. So first up is our strategic work plan update. As I mentioned, you all were very generous with your time and participated. We also brought in leadership here at Lane County. Steve and Greg both participated in this effort, as well as our rural partners. We had a number of communities provide us with feedback and ideas around how we might be able to assist them better. So what you're seeing here is a very abbreviated version of what we are working on over the next 3 years. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, it's not much of a departure from our previous work plan in that, you know, it really is the nuts and bolts of economic development. You're going to see regional business retention, expansion, and entrepreneurship services, targeted recruitment, specifically through our sector strategy initiative, strategic infrastructure investment. We all know that economic doesn't happen without the necessary infrastructure. We're talking roads, we're talking wastewater, we're talking high-speed broadband. All of those things that are very familiar to you are clearly showing up in this work plan. What you'll see that's perhaps a little bit new are opportunities around the night campus. You again are all very familiar with that opportunity, and we want to make sure that Lane County is being good partners in the development of that night center, night campus. Business advocacy. So this is a really great opportunity to simply formalize what we're already doing. Alex Kyler, your Intergovernmental Relations Manager, and I do a lot of work together, and that makes a lot of sense. And so really formalizing that within our work plan was important. And then finally, economic development tools. And one of my goals for the next year in particular is to really bring this program into a much stronger position as it relates to being able to report out the return on investment for our strategic investments. So making sure that we have access to those tools. You'll likely in the near future see a dashboard, an economic development dashboard come out that is both helpful to us internally and how we implement our programs, but also helpful to our external partners and how and the different metrics that they're interested in seeing. So that's our work plan in brief, and I'm happy to discuss it with you further and in more detail, but I wanted to give you at a glance. So sector strategy initiative, and Christina and Angela, feel free to jump in. This really is an economic development and workforce development opportunity for us in this region, and we really appreciate Lane Workforce Partnership's leadership in this effort. They brought it to the region 3 or 4 years ago now, 4 years ago now, and we've been doing some incredible work in close coordination with all of the regional partners throughout Lane County. And so I'm not going to do it justice. I really believe this video is a great way to explore what this initiative is. And so I'm going to play it, hopefully. maybe.
Jobs. They're moving pretty fast these days. Most of us know what it's like to feel obsolete in the modern job market, or to move away from home to find a good job. At the same time, lots of local
doesn't buffer so much.
jobs, they're moving pretty fast these days. Most of us know what it's like to feel obsolete in the modern job market, or to move away from home to find a good job. At the same time, lots of local employers struggle to find the right talent to make their businesses grow and thrive. It's an unfortunate misalignment, and it's a really big deal. Because if businesses aren't growing and creating quality jobs, the economy suffers. And if people can't access quality jobs...
We're going to pause it for a minute. Christine, is there anything you want to say to tee this up while we wait for this to buffer?
I need to fill in some space.
Let's fill some space.
A little happy talk at the 5 o'clock news here.
We could always hear your story about track while we
Yeah.
Yeah, how did you beat Steve?
Let's go into that later.
Okay.
He was North Bend High School, by the way.
Oh, competitive. So I will say, while we wait for this, is that I think this is a really exciting time for workforce development and economic development to be collaborating and partnering together. And the sector strategy initiative, this next gen sector initiative that you're going to hopefully hear more of as we get the buffering out of the way, really did provide the foundation for us to build this work off of. We knew we all struggled with how we were working together, how we were carrying our weight and staying in our lane and knowing what workforce development was and where our path was, respecting what economic development was. And the more we tried to keep those paths separate, the more we realized that that was just not even necessary. And what we really needed to do is find ways to work together. And so basically, over the last 4 years, we've found through this Next Gen Sector Partnership work that there are a variety of ways that we can support one another in moving efforts forward, things that never would have been on the radar for workforce development, I can say. I remember when we brought in the consultants and we're sitting around the room and she had told me everyone to invite, which is everyone we're working with now, from city planners and chambers and education and economic development entities from across our county, Business Oregon, just everyone that you could possibly think of sitting there around the room. And I'm thinking, how are we going to do this all together? And yet here we are 4 years later, and we've accomplished so much by just staying on the game plan and saying, this is what the industry wants. Who can do this best in our region? And we have really, really smart people who live and work here in Lane County, who can do this work. And so while it may not be that, I'm at the helm of this work, or Sarah is, or my board chair, Angela, while we're not possibly at the front, we may be somewhere in the back, but we're pushing. And we're doing it all together, and people know that they have our support. And then when we are in a position where we're up front and this is our piece and we're doing this, we know that we have the support of others behind us as well, because we're all working towards the same end. And that's for our local companies to feel supported, for our local our local Lane County residents to feel like they have the opportunity to gain the skills to meet the needs of industry.
Yeah.
So I think I talked long enough.
Let's hope. I'm going to go ahead and, in an attempt to have you watch this in its entirety, back this up. And we'll hope that makes it happen.
Jobs, they're moving pretty fast these days. Most of us know what it's like to feel obsolete in the modern job market, or to move away from home to find a good job. At the same time, lots of local employers struggle to find the right talent to make their businesses grow and thrive. It's an unfortunate misalignment, and it's a really big deal. Because if businesses aren't growing and creating quality jobs, the economy suffers. And if people can't access quality jobs, the community suffers. So what's going wrong here? What explains the disconnect between what businesses need and what schools are teaching? Aren't there a bunch of programs already working with businesses to meet their needs? Absolutely. In fact, lots of groups are trying to solve this problem, except they're doing it on their own. Education, workforce development, and economic development organizations are all talking to businesses. They're running focus groups and holding advisory meetings. What happens is that some employers are over-solicited, asked to participate in lots of different meetings and boards, while others are ignored entirely. Business leaders get burned out, industry involvement is low, and survey samples are skewed. To make matters worse, conversations with business are often organized around narrow topics like, what are your entry-level training needs? The result is that we often miss out on the bigger opportunities and needs that are shaping the industry for tomorrow, which just so happen to be the topics that business leaders are most interested in talking about. So what if we were able to flip things around a little bit? What if instead of the public sector pushing their programs and services on businesses, what if we could mobilize a whole industry to team up and engage with public partners to pull what they need from us, building the talent and skills of our local workforce while growing businesses and strengthening the sector? It's called a Next Generation Sector Partnership, and it can transform your region's economy. Next-gen sector partnerships are different than traditional sector partnerships in 3 key ways. 1, industry is at the center. Instead of organizing conversations with businesses around programs or grants, business leaders define and champion their own agenda and stay invested as a result. Industry at the center means that literally only businesses are given a seat at the center table. Public partners sit around the outside of the room in listen-only mode. Does that mean they're passive? Not at all. It means they give the floor to industry to design their own agenda, and they're poised for collective action as a result. It also means that businesses personally champion priorities. This is important. Next-gen partnerships don't advance initiatives unless there are business champions committed to them. 2, they tackle more than just workforce needs. In any growing industry, workforce is likely to be a top priority. But other things matter too, like infrastructure needs, supply chain issues, or access to capital. Next-gen sector partnerships tackle all of the above. Anything business leaders agree is important is a priority of a next-gen partnership. 3, community support. Next-gen sector partnerships are a team effort. Education, workforce, and economic development partners work together to respond to industry needs. It's not about a special initiative or a new program. It's a way of working better together. Next-gen sector partnerships work. Across the country, they're having a real impact. Metropolitan and rural areas have made timely changes to education programs at the right scale for the labor market. People are getting good jobs and keeping them. Meanwhile, businesses can hire the talent they need to grow, and they're generating new ideas, new markets, and new product lines because they're better connected with their peers. This boils down to stronger businesses and more people with better jobs. And that's what matters most in making our communities thrive. Is your region ready for something different? Visit nextgensectorpartnerships.com.
So I hope that was informative and provided you with a better explanation, certainly, than I would have been able to give. I really appreciate that video clip, and I think it really tells the story of why we do sector strategy work and why we really have elevated it in our program in community and economic development. It really does make sense. It helps our businesses and it helps our citizens, and that really is truly why we do the work that we do every day. So, as I mentioned, you are all likely familiar with Technology Association of Oregon. That is a result of sector strategy work, and a little bit of Christina saying, "Hey, you got to come down here and be part of the work that we're going on that's going on down here," and her leadership around that effort. There's clear success stories around the tech sector and the sector strategy work. There are clear success stories around the food and beverage sector strategist and the sector strategy efforts going on there. Whether it be more training opportunities around Food Safety Modernization Act for our businesses, and if you're not familiar with FSMA, you don't want to be. It's a very complex regulatory matter that our local businesses are having to deal with, and through our sector strategy work, we were able to identify that and then look to opportunities to help our local businesses with that effort. We recently, back in November, launched the Advanced Wood Products Sector Strategy Initiative. That's been co-led by Lane Workforce Partnership, Lane County, and the City of Springfield. We're in the middle of that one right now, and so it's yet to be determined how that rolls out. The key point here is that it's industry-led, and so the industry right now is helping us define what that work plan might be and who might help us lead that effort. And so we're excited for what might come there, and we'll certainly report back to you on those efforts. So that's sector strategy in a nutshell, and really as you continue to hear me talk and explain and report out on the different efforts that we have, you'll likely have it tied back to that sector strategy initiative, because it really is an important way to organize ourselves and leverage the resources of our partners as well as our own. Anything to add on that?
Yeah, when we talk about the successes, things that had been talked about in our community for a long time, we've found that by organizing ourselves this way, we're starting to see things happen rather quickly, rather than continue to talk about them and saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be great if?" Right. And one of the things that's also coming out of the sector strategy around tech is Lane Workforce Partnership, in partnership with the Technology Association of Oregon, is launching the first apprenticeship program in tech. And this is an effort in order to provide people who might not see themselves as working in a technology position. I think one of the things we've done as a workforce board is try to do some myth busting around, and when we talk about tech jobs, a lot of times people think, oh, well, that's just for those people who have computer science master's degrees and bachelor's degrees. And there's many pathways into the industry. And so we're starting with an apprenticeship program that is primarily targeting women and minorities and veterans in order to provide a clear pathway for them into the tech sector itself. So there's a lot of things going on within the industry, and I just wanted to point that one out because I do know that a lot of times people hear and see tech and they think it's just for a specific small portion of the population. We forget how large these companies are, and they have everything from someone who's scheduling appointments to their accounting departments, their HR. Not everyone is coding, and I'm just as an example.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's a great program.
Can I take on just
Please.
really quick? I just wanted to add, when Christina initially said the job that was before us when we first started talking about tech was huge. You said when she mentioned how many people to get into a room at one time was huge and monumental. I've been in enough of those planning meetings where things get talked about and nothing really happens. And this is really the one unique experience I've had in working with organizations where action really does happen. It's really at the forefront. And I do think the thing that has made this different is, just like the video has described, is that the voice of the industry comes first. Mm-hmm. The companies that we're working with, those voices are heard and they know they're heard. They see action coming because of what they're saying and what their needs are. It's not the voices of all the support mechanisms in the background. It's the voice of the industry. And I think that that's really very complimentary to everyone that's worked on it, is to keep those voices in the forefront and making sure that we are always focused on actions. We want to get things done.
Thank you. So next up is a conversation around our leveraged programs. And so again, as I mentioned, when I talk about leveraged programs, I'm really speaking to the Regional Innovation Training Fund that we partner with Lane Workforce Partnership on. The board has approved for a number of years now $75,000 annually to that fund, and it matches $75,000 from the Lane Workforce Partnership. And it's really an opportunity for us to get out into the community and some of these businesses who are looking at training their employees in innovative ways and provide them with some level of support, financial support for the work that they're doing there. And so we have a couple of examples here, and I believe the Lane Workforce Partnership flyer that you have at your seat also talks a little bit about that. But, you know, how long have we been doing it? About 4 years now, I think, 3 or 4 years. And so we've got some really shining star examples, if you will. And one of them is the Aggregate Consortium. And then another one of my personal favorites, frankly, is the Food for Lane County Food Warehouse Training. What you see in the middle there are a couple of quotes from actual individuals, and I think these are both from the Food for Lane County training, individuals who went through that training. And this is an opportunity for Food for Lane County to train up individuals who they find, and they could find them through a variety of different ways, who need some skills to help themselves get employed. And this food warehousing training, they learn how to drive a forklift. They learn warehousing techniques that Food for Lane County is very well adept at training folks in. And then they partner with other organizations, like organizations in the community, to help place those folks. And so you've got two examples in terms of written testimonials from folks who went through that program. It's very successful. They're going through a second round, and I have just a little bit of information here from Sue, who sent me the food warehouse training. Was offered 12 people facilitated by the warehouse staff. To date, they have trained 4 women, 5 men, ages 18 to 57, and have another cohort starting before July. So that's really impactful in our community, and that's just one very small example of the work that this Innovation Training Fund is doing. And
I would just add that the curriculum was developed by Lane Community College, and so the certificates that they receive are recognized certificates through the college. And so they're very, I would say, transportable, and it's been a huge value add. And I think it's a best practice, quite frankly, as far as food warehousing and I mean, what Food for Lane County is already doing, and now to have developed a training program as well, I think is phenomenal.
I would agree.
We thought you might like that one, Commissioner Farr. The Aggregate Consortium, I think this one's really interesting as well, because the 4 aggregate businesses that are here in this region really banded together for this one. They came together during their off season to recruit, train, and offer on-the-job training to 26 potential employees. Those folks were placed. So 26 folks were placed, and it's a CDL. It was a CDL training. Not all of them went to a CDL position. I think 18 were offered jobs in a CDL position, but all of them were offered positions. And so again, for $49,000, 26 individuals were given employment, which frankly is unheard of. It's quite incredible. And so those are 2 examples like I said, shining star examples, but just two. There are a lot of examples of this work that is going on, that has gone on over the last number of years, and we just want to make sure we extend a big thanks to the Board of Commissioners for your support in these opportunities, because your approval of those funding, this is truly what that approval has done over the last number of years.
Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Sarah, speaking of truck drivers, so what I'm hearing nationwide, there's a real issue on shortage of truck drivers. Is that the same that you're hearing even in Lane County as well?
Yes.
What's the starting wage for somebody with a CDL doing that kind of work?
Well, it really depends. Most start off in long haul truck driving, and it can be anywhere from $50,000 on up a year.
About the local aggregate folks, who are they?
Off the top of my head, I would not want to just rattle something off.
Okay.
We can pull that information. We'll contact Henry Fields over at Oregon Employment Department. We can pull that information for you pretty quickly.
Probably what you would consider a family wage.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say the criteria for the awards is that there are family wages, or it is clearly a path that leads to a family wage with the foundational training. And CDL training usually costs an individual anywhere from $6,000 to $7,000 for one person. So when we talk about a $49,000 investment, that's for 26 people. When we say it's unheard of, it's unheard of.
Yeah, wow. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll just mention that the structure at Lane Workforce Partnership, and I'm glad you're here to correct me if I make a mistake, but the structure is basically there's a council of elected officials. So Mayor Lundberg, Councilor Burbeck, from Cottage Grove, myself, Councilor Clark from the City of Eugene are among the elected officials. I think that's all of them.
Jesse Dolan represents.
Jesse Dolan, who is a staff person that represents the Florence city government. The council meets annually and appoints people to various positions. And the council also meets with the executive board, or is part of the executive board. So Ms. Pecor and the other members of the board meet together with the council. And we do that about quarterly, roughly. So these two particular projects, the truck driver heavy equipment training and the food warehouse training, were projects that the executive committee looked at and met the criteria, because in terms of bang for buck, we're giving this training for these folks that want to get their truck driver certificate, and it's a huge benefit to them and to the community. And the industry, the aggregate industry, is represented on our board in a big way. So they know it's a huge need, and this is helping to fulfill it. Similarly, with the food economy, the Food for Lane County food warehouse training was also part of a bigger strategy involving the food industry. So I think it's really great, and this involves, in terms of workforce, it involves use of federal and state funds. As far as I know, there aren't very much local funding. There's no property taxes that are part of that. It's all state and federal funding. So it's a very good program, and really worthwhile, and it's really worth the energy that we put into it.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. So real quickly, just being conscious of time here, the second fund that we have initiated with Lane Workforce Partnership is the Regional Entrepreneurship Fund. That's only been in existence this is its second year. Last year, it provided funding to RAIN and the Fertilab opportunities here in Eugene, and it really sort of from a regional aspect. And so they were able to receive about $150,000. Actually, they're receiving that this year. Currently, they have served 84 people in the program and have launched 3 companies and created 15 new jobs in the rural areas of Lane County. So Eugene Rain is embedded in Cottage Grove and Veneta. That's a little bit different than what you're going to hear in a little bit. But they work in coordination with one another. Similarly, NEDCO, Neighborhood Economic Development Corporation, has received 2 years of funding from this program. And in the first year of funding, NEDCO, in partnership with Springfield High School, enrolled 30 youth in the Food Innovators Program, 14 individuals in small business foundations, awarded 24 certificates of completion, assisted 10 individuals with IDA accounts, brought 5 new businesses into the food incubation space, along with launching 6 new food companies and creating 12 new jobs, all for $45,000. So again, thank you to the Board of Commissioners for your support of these programs. I think it's perhaps not unheard of that you might see more innovations around these different programs and iterations around these programs as we continue to look at them, examine them, think about how we might be able to provide service delivery in a better, more efficient way, or find a niche that isn't being met right now that might benefit from this type of funding. So stay tuned on that. But again, thank you for your support of these programs. Did I cover it? Okay.
Except, yes, I would also echo the same. I have no more additional information to add, but thank you so much. It has made a big, big impact in our community.
So next up is Rain. Why is that not showing up? Okay, well, we'll move on. Rural entrepreneurship is a really, really big part of what we do here at Lane County Community and Economic Development. And we have a fantastic partner in Oregon Rain in delivering that program to a number of our rural communities throughout the region. And Caroline Cummings is here today to really speak to those things. But you know, it started a couple of years ago with the board's support of financial support of the Oregon Rain efforts and programming in Florence. And Caroline has a lot of data for you on that. And you see both a glossy case study flyer at your chair and then also some metrics from the Florence endeavors. But what's also important to know is that you recently also approved funding for these programs up the Highway 58 corridor in both Lowell and Oak Ridge. And those, I believe, are going quite well as well. We don't quite have the data for you because they are relatively new, but from what I can tell anecdotally, they've been well received. So I would turn it over to Caroline here to talk to you a little bit about the programming, and we'll go on from there.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Commissioners. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here presenting to you again the results of the funding that you're providing, so thank you for that. One of the things that I've heard here today and that you've all heard and what you're going to hear from me is really creating opportunity for people in the community. And when RAIN enters a community, and if you'll remember, we never just enter, we have to be invited into these rural communities, which makes a big difference. It's that pull instead of that push. The local entrepreneurs, not just the city managers or administrators and the mayors and the economic development committees, but the local community members say to us over and over again, wow, I never knew this opportunity existed. I would still be doing X instead of Y. And so that's really the passion part of why I do this work. And so as you guys know, RAIN is working in rural communities, not just in Lane, but Lincoln, Benton, and Lane, Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties. It's always a tough one to say. And we recently got invited into East Lane, thank you to Sarah, we got calls from city administrator Louis Gomez, and then city administrator Jared Cobb in Lowell. And we've done 5 events in those communities, thanks to your support. And we were really surprised at the 5th event that we had we called a pub talk. And what we do is we, at that point, have already identified a handful of entrepreneurs from the Lowell, Oak Ridge, Westford, Dexter, Fall Creek, Jasper areas who attend. And we give them the opportunity to pitch their idea in front of their community members. What's fun is when the community members arrive, we give them a fake $50,000 bill, and we tell them to pretend like they are an investor. And after these entrepreneurs deliver their pitches, the community members walk up and say, I'm investing in you because, and they tell them why, and then they also give them a piece of feedback, which is really important because we're constantly talking about that. We thought we might get 3 or 4, maybe 5 entrepreneurs to sign up to pitch. We got 9, 7 showed up, the other 2 were ill. And we thought we might get about 25 community members, and we had 52. And what was incredible, this happened at the Brewers Union in Oak Ridge, was there was a draw from Eugene, Springfield, Lowell, Oak Ridge, Westford, all the communities I mentioned showed up. And that's how we know the work that we're doing is helping, because we're always focusing on that regional rural entrepreneurial development model, not just City A or City B. Those models don't work unless we're all working together. So the success that we've had there has been great. And there's already been an entrepreneur who's just raised $50,000 in Oak Ridge from an individual angel investor, Michelle Emmons, and she's opening up a concierge for outdoor right next to the Brewers Union. She just got the keys the other day. So that's going to be exciting. We're going to be doing meetups and pub talks in her location as well. The materials that you have in front of you is where we've had more success because we've been there longer. The case study that you see in front of you is for the entire Mid-Coast, but it does feature Florence. Most of the data in here is featuring Florence entrepreneurs. And then the other document that you have has the hard facts statistics that we report. And these are statistics that we report not only to all of you, but to anybody that funds us, and then also to the community. And since we've been in Florence, October of 2015, there has been 21 jobs that are new jobs that did not exist before Oregon Rain entered those communities. We've also, you'll see that the revenue is low, $103,000 in revenue, but that's because the companies that we're working with typically take 3 to 5 years to hit their stride. These are small businesses who have aspirations of becoming traded sector and growing. And really the best way of talking about those is the last 2 sheets in that document are success stories. And they really tell it better than I could. Patricia Immel is an entrepreneur in Florence. She and her husband were already a small business owner of an acupuncture medical facility. Her husband is a naturopathic physician. And she has a passion for creating personal care products. As a result of going through our pre-accelerator program in Florence and matching her with a retired physician, we came to realize that there is a major literal pain, because usually we always talk about a pain in the market. This is a literal pain. People who are amputees that have prosthetics have a serious pain issue from the products that are on the market currently, and they're very irritating. So we worked with her to do market research across the country, worked with contacts in the military. And she created this amazing salve called Nature Savvy. And we helped her get this product into Veterans Association rehabilitation centers all over the country where they're working with amputees. And you should see the feedback that she's getting from these vets as well as athletes who are now using her product. So she's already become traded sector, and she's had 6-figure sales, which she's never had before, as fast as she's had those sales. So she's very successful. And then the other entrepreneur I want to feature is Lindsay. She has a business, which Christina, by the way, has been an amazing mentor in coming over and driving over to Florence. So thank you for that. One of the things our rural communities appreciate is us not telling them they have to go to Eugene or Corvallis, right? They're like, no, we're people too. You know, the road does drive the other way. So we make sure we bring investors and mentors to them. And we really start bridging that rural-urban divide. And so people like Lindsay really appreciate that. And Lindsay had a day job that she was working on. And on the side, she's really creative. And she started getting scraps from Pendleton and creating beautiful accessories, handbags and belts. And Christine and I both own those. And they're not inexpensive. Like, she's charging a premium. They're very beautiful bags. So she thought, oh, I'll just sell them at maybe like a Saturday market or something. We matched her with several mentors. And again, the opportunity light bulb came on and she saw, wow, I can turn this into a real job. So she's now doing this full time. She's hired 3 people in Florence at living wages. And her sales last quarter were more than the entire year before that. So again, these are great stories about the key word is acceleration. And we're giving them the opportunity to create jobs, to grow revenue, and raise capital. So the companies that we're working with, in particular in Florence, collectively need a little more than $1 million in capital. That's actually, when they tell me that and I say, oh, that's all, that's actually a very small amount. We can help them raise that. If they said 30 million, that would be a little bit more of a jump. But RAIN recently received a grant from the EDA through the U.S. Department of Commerce for $300,000 to catalyze a new seed fund to invest in startups. And we have 3 priority regions that we're working on investing in. The #1 priority region is RAIN's 4-county region, including all rural. So for the first time, we will have fund managers traveling to rural communities, meeting and coaching entrepreneurs, and making seed stage investments between $25,000 and $150,000. So hopefully in a year from now, when we come back, we'll have some more success stories of actual capital investments into these early stage companies. And then the next thing we also have happening in this region, as Sarah talked about earlier, is our 10th annual Willamette Angels Conference that rotates each year between the communities of Corvallis and Eugene. We're excited to have it here for our 10th year. Our partner in producing that is the Eugene Chamber of Commerce. They do the event side. And we have 10 regional CEOs delivering Power Talks. Do you guys like TED Talks? Yeah? So they're going to be delivering 10 minutes TED Talks. Information like NEMA metrics. Matt Baudet is going to be talking in 10 minutes about how he went from 3 employees to 30 in just 3 years here in Eugene. Mark Frohnmeyer is going to be talking about how you raise capital through the Reg A process instead of, trying to raise 20, 50 million here in Eugene. It's hard to do that in Oregon as fast as he needed to do that. So there's several local entrepreneurs. I hope that you can join us. It's May 16th and 17th at the Downtown Athletic Club. Sarah and I will make sure that you get that information. I believe Commissioner Lyken is joining us with Sarah at that event. But it's our region's premier startup event. We will have all of the rural entrepreneurs. We give them a special price for them to attend the event, and they appreciate that. So with that, I'd like to pause and see if there's any questions that you have about the impact we've had in rural in Lane County or anything about the future for RAIN.
Questions or comments from the board? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say thank you to all of you for the great work that you're doing. It really does make a difference in the rural parts of the county, and I can't thank you enough on behalf of those folks who are seeing lives improved and job opportunities coming their way. It's huge, and it's commendable, the work that you do.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr?
I had just a general comment on the entire presentation. Could you go back a couple of slides to where you were showing that one right there? Nedco Youth for $45,000. You said you had how many graduates of that were placed in jobs?
Well, let me look. Let's see. That one was 12 new jobs, but I think that's only one of the metrics coming out of that particular program.
And then the
24
truck driver
certificates
training for $49,000 that had
Sorry again?
26. For 49,000, you had 26.
That was the truck driver, the aggregate construction one. That was 26.
Truly astounding numbers. So if we were to give you, say, $500,000 more, you could do that 10 more times?
I would be happy if you gave me $500,000 more.
And you could promise 10 more
We would
times
promise
26.
some great return on investment with that.
That would be astounding again. Well, thank you. What a great presentation. It really gives us heart for, this is a depressed economy that we live in. And you're addressing it right at the heart. You're addressing it in manufacturing and higher wage jobs that really serve the people who are already living in our community, people who are growing up here, graduating from our high schools and looking for work, wanting to stay here. And that is what pleases me, especially, is keeping the people who go to school here. So thank you.
I'll comment on the CDL thing really quickly. My husband owns a tree service in Lane County, and he pays his CDL drivers anywhere between $17 and $25 an hour with full benefits, and it's really difficult to find those guys and gals. Yeah. So I need to connect with you guys around that.
I spoke with Nick Balthrop this morning. You all know Nick. Nick got his education locally, but left for a while. And very talented man who looked at Eugene and Lane County and our metropolitan area, lives in Springfield, and decided to bring his family back here. This is what we want, the people who start their life here to continue and live their life here. And that, once again, that is what that's the energy and the effort that we're putting forth here. And I'm pleased, really pleased to see that happen. When I see people like Nick deciding with all of his talent to come here, and additionally the kids who graduate from high schools every single year here who have difficulty finding places to live because they can't find jobs to pay for the rentals. I mean, the rentals alone, let alone buying a house in our local economy. Once again, it's amazing. The numbers you're demonstrating give me a great heart for the future, a great hope for the future. Thanks.
Mr. Soren.
I'll just mention something for Ms. Cummings, and that is I'm very interested in seeing what can be done to incorporate the money that local governments have, particularly the money that is not currently used for economic development, but rather is money that is put aside and required to be put aside and invested for long-term purposes. Example would be our garbage dump and land facility out in Cresswell, where we're required to have a huge amount of money set aside for closure of that facility, and lending of money from that we set aside can occur from that solid waste fund. It has to be done carefully. It cannot be done wildly, and it has only been done since I've been here. It's only been done for intergovernmental transfers, intergovernmental loans. That is, loaning money from that fund for another Lane County government purpose. But I would be really interested in knowing, in light of the changes that have occurred at the national level about freeing up money to be used for investments, can public money be used to then jumpstart? Because the amount of money that's in those reserve funds is substantial. Now, can it be done currently? I don't know. Should it be looked at? That's what I'm suggesting, that may we evaluate that and determine whether or not the risk is appropriate. And if not do it. If it is something worth opening up with our budget and finance staff, I'd like to learn more about that, because that money is currently being used by someone else for their purposes. And I just think that the more we can turn that locally, within reason and within lawful use of those funds, we ought to be looking at that.
Well, I appreciate that, because as an entrepreneur and now an investor myself, I think if money is just sitting there, you're losing it every day. Yeah. And if there's a way to take a sample of those funds, and we could partner with NEDCO, Community Lending Works, where they're the experts in making the loans, if we were to take a small portion of that and loan money to Lane County entrepreneurs, I would love that. Yeah.
So I know that we're running short on time at this point. You know, my final slide was really what to expect for the next fiscal year, and I'll just keep it brief and say more of the same, hopefully even better results. I think we've got a great opportunity. We are now fully staffed in community and economic development. You've all met Austin Ramirez, our new economic development officer. He's doing fantastic work already, just about 2 months on the job. And so I'm really excited about the opportunities and the energy that's going into our program right now. You're going to see, like I said, a lot of the same kind of investments, a lot of the same general structure of work. Next year, I think you'll see a little bit more sophistication around the metric side of things, and I'm excited about that, so that we can really fine-tune that return on investment on these precious lottery dollars that fund the Economic Development Program. That being said, this is Economic Development Week. Happy Economic Development Week. It's not a coincidence that you're seeing me on Economic Development Week. I do have 2 degrees in planning. So you might see our awesome public information officer helped us with a social media campaign this week. So you'll pay attention to Facebook and Twitter. You'll see some video clips from our partners across the region. You're going to see written testimonials. Our friend here, Christina, provided us with a very nice written testimonial. Just a way to highlight the work that we're doing, the partnerships that we have, and really how we see Lane County Economic Development moving the needle in some really important ways throughout the region. So thank you for your time today. We very much appreciate it. I want to thank each one of these fine ladies that joined me here today. We do great work, and these are just 2 examples of partnerships that we have across Lane County. We really do rely on our partners every single day. So I just want to make it clear. These are just two very important ones, but just 2 of the many partners that we use daily in the work that we do. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to just, before you guys run off, just say that it was great to hear about the quiet part of community and economic development. I mean, a lot of what you guys do goes on in the background. Where we always make news is when we're we're recruiting some large firm, or some large grant or enterprise zone issue that we're taking action on as a board. That's really not the day-to-day economic development. What we've just heard from today and all the partners involved, from Food for Lane County to Lane Community College, the Workforce Partnership to RAIN, that's the daily growing of our economy that people don't think of too much when they think about a local government's economic development department. They always think of the recruitment of some firm from outside the area. And that's really a very small piece. And I just want to thank you guys for highlighting that quiet part of community and economic development today, because it's really important. It's much more easy and cost effective for us to grow these jobs here locally through, the RAIN, through some of the work you're doing with, 26 jobs for $49,000. Yeah. A lot easier than going through a recruit trying to land that firm that's looking for some place to site a national facility. That just doesn't happen that often, whereas this can be repeated year after year.
260 jobs for, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for saying that, Commissioner.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that. And just, so the board is aware, this is the work that I get the privilege of doing every single day. These are the things that come across my desk every day. We don't ignore recruitment opportunities, certainly, and they are important. But I think as how we've divided our program is very much what I consider an 80-20 split. 80% of the work that we do in community and economic development is all about our local community and our local businesses. 20% of the work that we do does speak to the recruitment and really showcasing this community to the outside world. But it's only 20% of the work that we do. And so I think it's really important to articulate that the vast majority of community and economic development projects are here, they're homegrown projects, helping our homegrown businesses.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Mr. Bozovich, since it is Economic Development Week, I do just want to recognize Sarah and recognize what a gem she is for Lane County. Much of our work is based on relationships and developing those relationships, and we can't develop those relationships without trust and integrity and knowing that someone will follow through on what they've promised. And so I always feel really good every time I engage in activity with Sarah to know that she's going to see it through to the end with me. And so I just wanted to quickly mention that as well. And thank you, Sarah.
I would echo that and talk about getting a lot for your money right here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I did not ask them to do that.
Yeah. But your boss's boss is sitting right behind him, so we heard all that.
And we know that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll jump back now to county administration announcements. Mr. Mokrzycki.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I have a couple of items to walk through here. The first is an update on elections. We're 1 week away from election deadline. All voters in Lane County, you have your, hang on, I've got stickers. Okay, so I did turn in my ballot, so I'm going to put a sticker on as well. My ballots, my wife and I have a ballot. Deadline for ballots is 1 week from today. Voters should all have their ballots that were mailed over a week ago. Voter turnout through yesterday, May 7th, was 29,300 ballots, or 11.7%. Voter turnout is updated at least every other day and posted on our website, lanecounty.org/elections. And you select the May 15th, 2018 link. Over 13,000 ballots have been returned at one of our 20 drop site locations. The list of drop sites is included with the ballot material. We will utilize over 150 hired extra help for the various election tasks required for this election. This includes 14 4-member opening pre-inspection boards of different party affiliation who will begin on Friday. We encourage people, though, to turn in their ballots early because we have a full-time staff that we can utilize to process those ballots before the big final push happens. Reminder for voters that voters must sign their own ballot return identification envelopes. On the outside of your envelope, there are many arrows and bold print notifications to make sure that you sign your ballot, and your ballot will not be counted unless you have signed the envelope. So ballots must be received at an official Dropbox site location by 8 p.m. on Election Day, again 1 week from today, May 15th. You can check the status of your ballot at OregonVotes.gov. So that's the election update. Thank you to our clerk, Cheryl Betchart, and her great staff for the work that they're doing on this and every election. And then last week we didn't have time, but I wanted to share a brief update on ADUs, and we have Lydia Kay here, our Land Management Division Manager. If there are questions, I'm not sure. Are you here for this item? Or you're just kind of hanging out in case we happen to have questions? Okay. So I'll do a brief update. If you want to come up here, Lydia, I'm not sure if there will be questions from commissioners, but regarding SB 1051 related to accessory dwelling units, as the board likely knows, ADUs are required to be permitted within UGBs but are not currently legislated in county zones. So we are taking all of the following code amendments through the board process concurrently, both for the for small cities in Springfield and Eugene in the UGB. The board will have a first reading on June 12th, and then a second reading is planned for June 26th. for all the ADU amendments, and you'll need to adopt an emergency clause so that they can be effective on July 1st. So related to small cities, Lane County or Lane Code Chapter 10 governs unannexed portions of all cities other than Eugene and Springfield. Those ADU standards are consistent with state guidelines, are being developed to be adopted into Lane Code Chapter 10, and the board has sole authority for Chapter 10, so joint meetings with the small cities are not required. For Springfield, amending the code in the unannexed portions of Springfield will require adoption by the City Council, Springfield City Council, and the Board of Commissioners, and there is a joint Springfield-Lane County Planning Commission meeting scheduled for May 8th, which is tomorrow. Oh, okay. That is right. My watch is wrong. Okay. For tonight, thank you. And for Eugene, Eugene has sole authority for the code that applies within the city of Eugene limits, so the board will not be taking any action on Eugene's code amendments. Lane County has sole authority for the code that applies to the unannexed portions of the UGB. That UT code already allows ADUs, so the amendments will largely focus on eliminating the requirements to annex the city, to annex to the city to construct an ADU. We have heard feedback, and Lydia may be able to expand on this, from neighbors, especially in the Santa Clara and River Road areas, that have expressed concerns about allowing ADUs. So as well, we've seen advocacy, we've also had some concerns about that, expressing concerns about negative impacts on neighborhoods by increasing density and traffic. Of course, we know in the Santa Clara River Road area, parking and traffic have been big issues. The code will require that the ADU provide an off-site parking spot so there will be less impact for on-street parking. So that's the plan. Again, June 12th, we have a first reading scheduled, and then June 26th, second reading with an emergency clause to be effective for July 1st. Do you want to add anything else?
I would like to, yes, thank you very much. The one update, we had a meeting last week with the Planning Commission for Eugene's UT code and also for Chapter 10. And the Planning Commission was actually interested in stripping away some of the requirements, including the parking space. And we can talk about that more when it comes before the board. It may be something we want to talk about at the time of the first reading, which we don't usually do. Because again, the way the statute is written, we can only address a small amount of standards that are related specifically to siting and design. So I think there will be some discussion about how much, if any, we want to provide limits on those ADUs.
Commissioner Farr.
Thanks. Well, I'm glad we're moving forward with that. You've seen the LCD, guidance document on dwelling units, and you've seen what they say about parking on that. The on-street parking issue hasn't been surrounding ADUs. The on-street parking issue is surrounding large multifamily developments. So the discussion regarding ADUs, we have to do every single thing that we can possibly do to make it, to facilitate people being incented to add ADUs. Obviously, it's one of the best ways that we have, one of the best tools that we have to provide additional front doors at lower cost. Everybody wins with ADUs. The property owner wins, the taxing district wins, the people who get to live there win, and the more that we can do to facilitate it, and to really take a look at what DLCD says. They're really very direct in what they anticipate some municipalities, including counties, may want to do to slow down, to impede the addition of ADUs. And we need to make certain that we're not an impedance to the addition of ADUs, that we are facilitating it in every single way that we can.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. Yesterday I was mowing my lawn last evening. Truck pulls up in front of my house. Guy gets out, and he lives outside of the urban growth boundary, has a piece of property. His son and daughter-in-law and two children are residing on that property in a fifth wheel home on a slab hooked up to their septic tank. He's been given notice that he's got 15 days to get that off his property. Difficult for him because where does his kids go and his grandkids? That's a difficult thing. So having said that, hardly a day goes by that I don't have some reason to call you or the folks that report to you. And I understand the incredible, difficult job. Cheryl, I just really take my hat off to her for the work that she does and the patience that she has, not only with me, but people that call her. But my question specifically is, we're talking about cities and urban growth boundaries and beyond that. What do I tell the gentleman that stopped by my house last night, concerned that his kids and grandkids are going to be moved off of his property in a safe environment and I guess moving into a van down by the river? Do you have any?
Move from eventually too.
I might add that this gentleman is a veteran, as is his son, who is now looking at being forced to move. So, I'm not really looking for answers other than, does this ADU apply outside of urban growth boundary areas in indeed rural part of Oregon? It's a critical thing. You've got these people there in their safe environment, but they're forced to move to who knows where.
So this is an issue. We expect actually that there will be a lot of discussion at the coming year's legislative session about whether or not to apply these rules to counties. Currently, they do not, so it only applies within the UGBs. There was actually, the rules were originally written that they would have included counties, but that was seen as an error, so that was actually that language was removed, so that's not applicable. However, I know that this is a big issue for a lot of people, so I think there will be a very robust discussion about that, and it certainly is possible we'll see those types of allowances in the future.
Well, thank you. And again, I really appreciate the work that you folks are doing over there and the difficulty of the job. I mean, every day I seem that I'm calling you folks with yet another burden for you. So
What we're there for.
Thank you. I understand.
Thanks. I will mention that is on our legislative priorities.
Yeah, this I know, and it does apply to counties as it pertains to in the urban transition inside the urban growth boundary outside the city limits, which we have a great deal of property that it does apply to. A city with a population greater than 2,500 or a county with a population greater than 15,000 shall allow in areas within the urban growth boundary. Shall allow, not may, not should consider. It says shall. So we need to remember that.
So anything else on ADUs? We need to get to our exec session here because we do have a 1 o'clock budget committee.
Oh, sure do.
Any other announcements?
I don't. I just want to make another clarification. As I said originally in the comments that our current code, the code in the UT currently allows ADUs. That has not been the case within city limits, and so I wanted to make that clear that the current code already allows, and as Ms. Case said, state law does not allow us to address ADUs within the county. That may be something that we want to talk about at the legislative committee in terms of adding that to our policies that we're advocating for in the next session.
I think we may have already put it on there.
It is, yeah.
Is it on there?
And my frustration stems from the night I sat here with the Eugene City Council listening to the testimony that came forward saying why we shouldn't do ADUs and why we should slow it down. So that's where my frustration lay.
Thank you. Okay. So if that's county council announcements, I think the only thing is we do have exec session that we need to get to. Commissioners' business announcements. Mr. Lykin, I think you had.
I do. So real quickly, I just wanted to let the board know. So I think we have a really good opportunity here through a person that I know back in Washington, D.C. We have an opportunity to, in fact, I think it's really administratively honest, but I think it's important for the board to be aware. So we have a golden opportunity to bring somebody on board as a consultant for the next 3 months, who has very close relationships with the leadership in Interior and with Secretary Zinke as Chief of Staff and some others. And this would not be advocating any sort of new policy, but instead this would be acting on behalf of Lane County and potentially other counties, but on behalf of Lane County, to administratively look at the ONC lands and BLM lands that are managed by BLM, to where administratively they could potentially open these lands up for harvest. That is really written in the 1937 ONC Act. I mean, it wouldn't be anything new. And so what I did is I referred this contact to Steve and staff, and they're reviewing and going over that. But I think it's a good opportunity, and I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you were suggesting for head nods, I'm not sure, to just the board to, in a sense, encourage the administrator to continue working with this consultant. But so all the information is with Steve. It's out of my hands. I just made the introduction. So, and we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Has this been to the legislative committee, or is it to help on federal policy, federal forests, that sort of thing?
It's on federal forest and has not been referred to the committee, I think, because part of it is it's only for 3 months. And when I consulted with Chair Bozovich on this, it was one of those things that the reality is, I think Steve could have just administratively done this and been done with it. But I think just out of courtesy, it's just to let the board know that this was being undertaken. And like I said, it's for a short time period, I believe. I don't know all the ins and outs, but that's what it sounds like. It's for a short time period, and potentially would have benefits for not just Lane County, but go beyond that. And if the ONC Association wants to have discussions with these folks as well, that's really up to the association and not us. But it was an opportunity presented. I handed it off, and that's where we are.
And just one clarification for Commissioner Sorensen and for all the commissioners. My understanding is that the engagement would really be around focusing on what is already in policy. So this wouldn't be development and advocacy for new forest management policy. It would be working with the Interior Department to identify what is already allowed within existing law, and making sure that the BLM is pursuing that course.
Yep.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Mr. Marcarasi, I just wanted to mention that the City of Eugene recently renamed a couple of facilities in town after Andrea Ortiz, who passed away, and Ed Coleman Jr., who passed away. We know about that, and it was a fantastic move by the City of Eugene to act swiftly with that. But also, unfortunately, other people acted swiftly with that also, and graffiti showed up almost immediately on the it's called the Edwin Coleman Jr. Community Center. Racist slurs, the graffiti's been taken care of. But it points out that in our community, even where we honor diversity, where we honor equity and access, we still have people who feel emboldened to step forward and commit what are actually crimes, prosecutable crimes. And I'm going to read a couple of words that were forwarded to me by Paul Biondi, and I think most of us got the words from Paul, and I told him I'd share a couple of them. He wanted to be here today. He said, in a town where most residents enjoy and invite diversity, we have a select group of racists who want to intimidate and bully others. They spread fear and are emboldened. they find our small town ripe for intimidation. And I know, Mr. Milkraski, that you and our staff in the Sheriff's Department and the people that we work with are absolutely attuned to that. And just reassuring people that we are attuned to that and we will not tolerate that kind of activity in our community. Thank you.
Any other announcements from the board? Then I'll move to agenda team request or work session request. Any requests from the board? Seeing none, then I will move to review of assignments.
Mr. Chair, I just had two notes here. The first was related to the letter, the item that you approved earlier, the letter to the City of Eugene Council regarding historic Hayward Field and moving forward in a timely fashion on that. And then the other was the suggestion from Commissioner Lyken that we work with the Interior Department on pursuing it, the administrative procedures that are already in place and advocating for that. So those are the two that there was obviously the discussion related to the youth council came up, and I don't know, I didn't hear any specific direction on that. But I did hear a general desire for the board, that the board was interested in looking at opportunities to engage young people in different existing youth councils and maybe the potential over time to look at a countywide youth council.
I would offer contact with the city manager in Cottage Grove. He can, I mean, he's the expert on that, and a call to him could probably, that'd be a good start.
And Mr. Milkraski, our chair did a superb job of wrapping that up regarding, the efforts we have put forward, and that whatever we do can be in conjunction with what is already underway.
And actually, I think that's a great way to start, is to work with our existing advisory committees and see where there's an interest on the part of young people, and as well as the advisory committees that are established to get youth involved on those established committees. And then over time, if we have enough youth that are involved in those advisory committees, we may be able to pull those individuals into a broader youth council representing sort of a number of different issues. I do think we'd want to make sure we had geographic diversity at the very least, representing as many of the school districts as possible. So I'll work with Ms. Gaffney, and we'll add that as an assignment as well.
Thank you. So before I read us into exec session, I'll ask if there's any other business for the board. So the executive session is not dealing with any items that we should have to come back out into public session to make decisions on. So I will most likely be adjourning the board meeting from executive session. And then, of course, we'll be convening this afternoon as the Budget Committee with Chair Hitchmans at 1 o'clock. But the Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-6602H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decisions may be made in executive session, and we will most likely not come back out in the public session. So with the strike of the gavel, we are going to move.
I need to put on my my notice about the possible conflict of interest because I read the notice from the County Council about the purpose of the executive session. So Mr. Malone, I noticed, was one of the lawyers involved. And as I mentioned before last week, Mr. Malone's law firm and my law firm are involved in a case where we're doing work together, but it has nothing to do with Landwatch, and I've never discussed any of his Landwatch activities with him, but I feel like I need to put that on the record, out of an abundance of caution. I don't think it's posing any actual conflict of interest, so I'm just giving notice of a potential.
And as we won't be making any decisions in exec session, thank you for the notice of potential conflict, but I don't think we'll have to worry about it at this point.
Yeah, I've asked the LMD people since I've never talked to Mr. Malone about his land watch work, I asked them to let me know if there's any land watch things where he's been involved. Last week, I brought this up involving the Coburg, but they told me he wasn't involved in that.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. So with that, we will go into executive session immediately up in the Board of Commissioners conference room.